Hi YouTube, you'll see me from this angle because I'm going to be doing some audiobooks. I was going to start with this, Murder at the Theatre Royal, but I got through the first page and I just couldn't continue with some of the words. It's so old-fashioned speak. It's hard for me to read it. It's got words like combatants and bereft and portrayed dialogue. Well, dialogue is fine, but portrayed. So it's too hard for me to read. I'm sorry. I'm going to try my hardest to find someone reading this out loud so I can actually read it, but it's too difficult for me to read. So I'm sorry, that's a no. So, because of that, I'm going to go to one that I got from the library, called The Other Side of You. Chapter 1. There was a knife and blood, and the thud of a door. There was the taste of blood in my mouth, and the sound of feet down the stairs, 2 steps at a time, almost blinded by sweat and fear. The knives coming for me. Have you ever had a dream about being chased? You run, and no matter how hard you try, you can never get away. But my chase wasn't a dream. It was real. I wasn't going to wake up safe at home in bed. I didn't have a home anymore, or a bed. All I had were my legs and my feet, and they were pounding the street as hard as they could. My shoes didn't fit properly, and my lungs hurt like they were on fire, and I felt sick, but I had to run. The Bang Gang were after me, and when they came for you, it was run or die. The Bang Gang ran my estate. Even if you wanted to stay away, even if your mum begged you, they sucked in all the kids. Nobody could escape. Nobody wanted this life. It just happened. It was normal not to go to school. It was normal to go to prison. Like it was normal to deal drugs, carry a knife, bang any kid smaller than you. How and why I pissed off the gang big time is another story. All that mattered was that kind of fear I had. There are 2 kinds of fear. There's the kind that makes you stand and fight. There's the kind that makes you run and keep on running. Either can get you killed. On my estate, there was no right or wrong. There's only live or die. Sooner or later, most died. Even if you got to the top, you became the boss. You died. Another guy was always waiting to take your place. My estate was famous all over the city. Not for any good thing, like a rap star or a lottery winner. It was famous for killing. Every 2-3 months, somebody got shot or stabbed. Often. They weren't anything to do with the gangs. They would be walking someplace or sitting in their flat, trying to stay out of trouble. Made no difference. Bang stood for bullets, anger, knives, guns. Also, bang is in steal. Bang is in kill. Bang as in rape. Nobody was quite sure what it meant. All of these and more, but most of all the noise gun makes. Many years ago, before I was born, my estate was known to be bad, dangerous, but nothing like it is now. The police never came near it, unless there'd been another stabbing. The social workers, jokes. It was Crim Central. Nobody could be inside the law and survive. Nothing good happened to anyone there. ever. Some people, like Auntie May, bought a lottery ticket each week, like anything was going to change ever. Everyone young, including the girls, carried a knife. Everyone except me, that is. I've been beaten up so many times, but I knew that all a shank, a knife, would do was get me stabbed, as well as punched and robbed. If you went to school, you were a target. I stayed in school right up until 16. Auntie May said, "You have a good head on those shoulders, Billy. Use it." Auntie May, I couldn't think about that. I was half crazy with fear, but I used my head. I ran. The estate had been my whole world for 7 years. I hadn't been out since I turned 11, except to go to school down the road, but even that was dangerous. Across the road on the next estate was the other gang, the Bulldogs. Sooner or later, they saw you weren't a little kid anymore and mashed you up. Any excuse would do. You learned to keep looking over your shoulder. I knew every twist and turn. I knew where there was a bin so you could jump up onto the walkway, and where there was a small passage. I knew where there was a gap in the wire of the mugger. That's the multi-use games area. The caged football pitch where nobody played games. Or not games it was made for. Anyway, I knew where the bushes were in the bit of green where people brought their dogs to dump. It was one big dog turd. I knew which places you could squeeze into and wiggle through, and which places were dead ends. Trouble is, so did they. Sticks, Gaza, Lips, and Raffle had all grown up on the estate, just like me. Just like me, they had mums who wanted the best for them, but that meant staying out of trouble. But trouble would still find you, or the gang did. We all knew the price of a bullet. They did some stealing and dealing. They carried knives. They got little kids to deliver drugs into school, and they put the fear into people. Even if you joined them, you were afraid. When you saw them up to no good, you looked the other way. Chances were somebody was watching what was going on right now, but if I got stabbed, it would turn out everybody was blind and deaf as well as dumb. You didn't tell on the bang gang, not unless you wanted to be shanked too. Besides, it was the middle of the night. "Hey, bestie," I could hear Gaza hiss. "Come now, boy, we ain't gonna cut you so bad." He had nunchuck, 2 metal sticks joined by a chain. They might not look much, but if he got near me, I'd find them wrapped around my throat in no time. The others had shanks, big ones, with jagged edges, like you might skin a rhino with. Lips had a gun. I didn't have so much as a twig. My mum made me promise I'd never carry. Having a gun isn't life insurance, Billy. It won't make you any safer, no matter what they say. I needed to catch my breath, so I hid in the doorway of a shop. It wasn't a real shop. It was what they call a business unit, boarded up and empty like all the shops on the estate. Nobody could run a business. If anyone dared open a shop there, first week the bang gang would be round asking for money. Second week you'd be robbed. Third week you'd be banged for disrespect. Result, you had to go on a bus to get to Iceland just for a pint of milk. Not that any of the bigger kids went. Iceland was off the estate, and that was out of bounds for the brothers of the bang gang. If you went into another gang's territory, somebody would make a call. I knew this, but I also knew that if I didn't make it off the estate, I'd be killed anyway. I was hoping, this time in the morning, when it was cold and dark, I might not be noticed. But I couldn't stay where I was. For one thing, the longer I stayed, the more cold and scared I became. For another, the gang was getting closer. I could see the glint of gold around their necks, shining in the fizzing orange street light. And I knew that, before long, they'd find me. They found everyone. I felt alone and dead scared. Scared so I might drop dead of fear. I was so thirsty. The thirst was worse than the hunger, worse than the anger, worse than the sorrow. If the band gang didn't get me, the thirst would. What could I do? I had to send them in a different direction, away from me. How was that possible? I couldn't be in two places at once. Or could I? There was a big steel trash bin about 20 feet away. It was full of rubbish. The binmen mostly didn't bother to come. Mostly it was set on fire, but the firemen didn't come either. I scrabbled around for something to throw. The concrete wall beside me was cracked. I pulled at it, quiet as possible. A chunk came away with a slight noise. The gang stiffened like dogs. Over there! I threw the stone at the bin as hard as I could. It made a loud metallic thump. The gang stopped, like one creature with 5 heads, and turned. Something moved in the shadows. A cat, or a rat maybe, but it did the trick. There. They ran one way, and I the other. My feet pumped the pavement again, and then, at last, I was out. The estate was behind me. The wide road lay like a river of darkness before me. It might be 10 times more dangerous being out in the open, but I didn't wait. I ran. Chapter 2. I was halfway across the road when the gang burst out behind me. They knew, as well as I did, that the CCTV cameras were bust. They'd bust them. Cars came along sometimes, but they drove fast and never stopped. Everyone knew not to stop. In the days when we had a TV, I sometimes watched nature films. There was one about a herd of deer trying to cross a river, and on either side there were crocodiles waiting. They didn't look like crocs. You saw these things that looked like big logs in the water, floating. The deer go as fast as they can. They know there's danger, but they can't see it yet. Then one of the logs splits open, and it's all teeth. It's the croc, big as a nightmare, grinning. The teeth grab and snatch, and a deer goes down. Then it's crunch, crunch, crunch. The croc tearing and gulping, blood in the water. Only sometimes they pick the wrong one, and the deer jumps away. It was like that now. There was a metal barrier halfway across the road, and that was the crossover point between my estate and the others. That was a line we never crossed, no matter how bad the boss was at me. Sticks, Gaza, Raffle, and the rest would stick to this side of the line, and the bulldogs would stick to theirs. If you crossed over to the other side, it was war. I should have jumped right away. The barrier was only waist high, and guys like me, we could jump, even if we had nothing to eat all day but a bag of crisps. We could jump as if springs were in our heels, just like those deer. But something made me stop and look back. Maybe I knew that this was the last time I'd see the estate. I had nothing and nobody to go back for. My mum was dead, and Auntie May too now. She'd hated me. I'd hated her. She was always on my case. She was the first to call me Beastie. Boy, you look so ugly and dirty. You look like a beast, she'd say. Look at yourself. Dirty hair, dirty claws, bad smell and bad skin. Ugh. When you last brush your teeth, Where is the good Billy from school? Gone to hell, I answered. I knew that would make her angry enough to reach for her cane. She had a cane. Maybe she'd brought it all the way from Jamaica. It was real bamboo, and you could hear it sing through the air before it landed on your ass. Man, did I hate that. Only now she'd never make me yell again. I looked back, and that was when the gang began to whoop and call. Yo, Beastie, keep running, B. They're going to love you. Suddenly, I understood what they were doing. They were trying to draw the bulldogs out, so they shanked me instead. The more noise they made, the bigger the danger. Someone would hear, then someone would come and see. They'd think I was crossing the line for a dare. I had seconds to get over the road and disappear. Where to run in a place I'd never been to and knew nothing about. They'd know I was a stranger. I might as well have a big X on my back. I had never felt so lonely or so afraid. Beastie boy, you can run but you can't hide. Run, said a voice. Run now. By now, it was so dark that I could hardly see who had spoken or where I was going. And maybe that helped. Or maybe it was the rain that suddenly fell down like a sheet of plastic. Everything was behind a grey, crackling blur. The pavement was slick and the gutters gurgled. We were all blinded. Behind me, I heard a gunshot, then another. I ran, and my heart was going so loud I couldn't hear any more. Nothing hit me, only raindrops as big as bullets. I was soaked in seconds. Things went past me, big buildings, cars, trees, street lights, street lamps, signs. It was an endless maze. I had my mobile, but it was out of credit and out of juice. I had no idea where I was. I had never, apart from when I was a tiny child, been more than half a mile from my home. All I knew was that I'd been born north side across the river. Any good memories I had were from that time, memories of grass and trees. So I tried to head for the Thames. At some point I found it, though it was so wide I thought it might be the sea. It smelt salty, and mist was rising off it. But then I came to a bridge. I crossed that, and by now I couldn't run any more. How long I walked for, I don't know. It was still night. I kept stopping and looking over my shoulder to see if I was being followed. I've done that all my life. I didn't even know I was doing it. I knew I must hide. By now there were more buses about, all lit up and carrying people to work. The idea of sitting down somewhere was tempting, only I couldn't try it. I had no money, no family, no home, nothing. Besides, I wasn't alone. Chapter 3. I don't know how I knew that somebody else was there. I wasn't looking. Yet I also knew I wasn't alone. Somebody was on the other side of me. I couldn't make out who it was. It wore a hood like me. No matter whether I ran or walked, it kept up. I didn't know if it was a man or a woman, only that they were there. My feet had long since stopped throbbing and started bleeding. Somewhere I had a cut on my arm and another deeper one on my back. Gaza had made those as I ran past. They would bleed and dry and catch and then bleed again. I had a feeling like I should stop and lick them like an animal. I knew I was losing a lot of blood from deep inside me. Clean out later. Find the safe place first. How could I find the safe place when I'd never been here before? You will, the person said. I have felt this person beside me ever since I had hid in the shop door. It was their idea to throw the stone at the bin. When I stopped at the middle of the road, it held out its hand and pulled me across. Each time I stopped, tired and hopeless, it spoke. Keep going. I couldn't say who it was. Sometimes I thought it was a man, sometimes a woman. I did know that I could trust the voice. It sounded friendly. The sun was rising, and the air was all white, like when you put soap on a window. Things went there until the last moment, when suddenly it became real and solid. Once I found myself walking into a lamppost. Jokes. By now I was away from the river and well away from my estate. I wish I had a bike, even though the bikes we had were all tiny kids' bikes. Little kids get bikes, but bigger kids never. So we banged the tiny ones and rode about, knees up to our chests, better than nothing. I'd never walked so far. My trainers had given me so many blisters that I hardly felt them. My top was still soaked, and I was still getting the shakes from cold. I walked down a hill and up a hill, down a hill, the pavements pushing my bones. I turned off a big road into a street of shops. Even with the shutters down, I could tell they were open. Lights were on. Some weren't shuttered at all, but the glass wasn't broken or boarded up. I saw takeaways, a chemist, a hairdresser, a hardware shop, a greengrocer, a newsagent, a post office, a bakery, a Poundland, a library. It was like a street in a kid's book. I didn't know streets like that really existed. Posh, I muttered. It was a word my mum had used. I hadn't known what it meant, but I did now. When I left that street, I was in a place with old houses all lined up together. The houses had trees in front and small gardens. There was no rubbish. There were pots with flowers. The cars weren't new, but the front doors were all different colours. I came into a square when I was little. I had gone to places where there were other old houses, so I knew enough about London's squares to know there should be grass in the middle with railings. Instead, there was this big wire wall. It was 3 times as high as a man. At the top was barbed wire. Behind the wire, I could see only trees, more trees and thorns, and some kind of building. It would be the perfect hiding place if I could get in. The gates had a chain and a huge padlock on. No give. Climb up, said the voice. The sun was rising, and I knew that I must get over the wire fence right away. Soon people would be waking, and I needed to get out of sight. Me, covered in blood, would not look good to whoever lived here. There were signs warning this was a neighbourhood watch area with smart water, whatever that meant. I took a running jump at the fence and climbed. The trick to climbing any wall is to do it like a fox. Fast. It all has to be one motion. If you stop and think, you're lost. Right at the top, I kicked my feet into the air. I almost made it, only my bad arm let me down. The barbed wire sank its rusty teeth into my skin. Unlike the knife, it hurt at once. I knew, even as I fell, that it would be bad, but the place into which I fell wasn't like anything I'd seen before. You'll be safe now, said the voice, and then, quite suddenly, I was alone. Chapter 4. At first, I could see nothing but tall, thin, grey trees. They stood up like spears. I was lucky not to have landed on top of one. I pushed forwards, holding onto them to stay upright. There was a house behind the trees, but it wasn't an ordinary house. It was all glass, and it sparkled in the rising sun as if it were made of diamond. I'd never seen a glass house before. I went forward, carefully, and peering through the panes. Inside there were more plants. It was weird. I wondered if it was skunk. They were the only plants I'd seen before, and that had been in a flat where lamps were on day and night. Only those plants were all the same, and these were all different. Maybe the plants were drugs, or maybe poison. I didn't want to touch them, in case. If I hadn't been hurt bad, I'd have turned round and got out, but that meant climbing the wire wall again, and by now I was feeling bad, so I went in. It was warm. That was the first thing. Not cold, not hot, just right. There was a smell, sweet, but not too much. Better than Mum's perfume, which is the best smell I know. It came from some white flowers, little like stars. Yet each plant was different. Some were so big they looked as if they came from dinosaur time. The one with the white flowers had twisted itself all the way along the roof. Another had big bright red trumpets. There were trees too, with bright shiny green leaves, like plates. Some had fruit that looked like oranges, some had bananas, some had green pears. What was this place? Even though my arm was hurting almost as much as my belly, I wondered. I felt like an explorer in the jungle. There were flashes of wings, pink, blue, green, brown, soft, fluttering noises and trills. Otherwise, it was quiet. Not a bad kind of quiet, when people are dead. A good quiet. I could almost hear those plants growing. I could feel the roots spreading, the leaves swelling, the flowers opening. You will be safe here, the voice had said. For the first time in many hours, I began to relax. I was far away from the Bang Gang and my estate. I didn't need to keep looking over my shoulder. Whatever this place was, it was different. I knew nobody could climb that wire wall unless they were desperate. Anyway, it was just a glass house. Nothing to steal, just plants and bits of rubbish. Candles and plastic pots and racks with a few packets of seeds. A metal bucket with a grill. Plastic bags with brown stuff in that made some creature had scratched open. Paper bags with black stuff, none of it drugs. I found a till, empty, and some leaflets about a garden centre. This must be the place. It looked as if it had been abandoned for months, maybe years. I was hungry though. I was always hungry, like my belly was trying to eat itself. Most days I didn't get more than a bag of crisps to eat. Auntie May cooked sometimes, and those were good days. Rice, beans, sweet potato, food that fills your belly. But I wouldn't be getting her cooking anymore. Right in the middle of the glass house was a sink, a kettle and 2 cupboards. From the dust and a mess, I didn't expect anything, but I turned the tap. Out came a gush of cold. I let it run, in case the water was bad. It went on flowing, so I drank. It was the best drink ever. Then I looked in the cupboards. Maybe I'd find coins or gear. But I found tins, tuna, beans, tomatoes, pineapple, milk. No tin opener. I was so hungry. I could have cried. All that food, and locked up so I couldn't eat. But then I looked in the dim dawn light and saw that each tin had a ring on it. Ring on top. Pull the ring. The tin opened. In a moment, 2 tuna and beans were gone. I don't even remember eating. I hadn't had so much food for a long time. Then I had some pineapple. It was so sweet and sour and syrupy. The pineapple was in chunks, so you didn't have to cut it up. There was a box of something called Quaker Oats, which looked like sawdust. I wanted to eat more in case the food went away, but I felt sick again. As if I ate more, I'd be sick. I could rest, then think what to do. I was so tired. I wasn't sure what was real anymore. My arm was still bleeding, and I had deep scratches from the barbed wire. I had to clean the cuts before I slept. I washed them with water. It wasn't enough, I knew. Both were going red and angry. My hands were dirty. Auntie May was right. The sink had a bottle of liquid by it. I sniffed it, and it was soap. It smelled funny, but okay. So I washed the cuts and looked for a first aid kit. Anybody who left food like this must have one. There was a green box with a white cross. Thank you, I thought. Inside were bandages, antiseptic, painkillers. By now, my head was spinning. I smeared antiseptic on the cuts and tied the bandage on my arm. Swallowed painkillers. Close by, I saw a heap of old cloth. I fell on this. I passed out. Chapter 5. When I woke, I felt terrible. So terrible. I even forgot to think about the gang hunting for me. I was weak and hot all over. My throat and head were raw. The cuts were red and felt like they were burning. My arm was swollen. I swallowed more painkillers. I drank water. It didn't help my throat, but I slept again. Each time I woke, I did the same. I got up only to drink and piss. Auntie May was in most of my dreams. She'd taken me into her flat when Mum died. It was that or social services. I think she got some money, child benefit, for me until I turned 16. She didn't care for me, nor I for her, but she was better than being in care, for sure. She never knew what brought the band gang into her home, to stab her where she sat. All I wanted was to mind my own business. Only that was the one thing you couldn't do. By the third day, my head was clear and the cuts were no longer puffy. I was hollow with hunger, but better. I ate more tuna, more beans, more pineapple. After a couple of days, there were none left. The only thing I hadn't tried eating was the oats. The instructions said to just add a cup of water or milk and microwave. Then add salt or sugar. I didn't have a microwave, but I did have hot water from the kettle and sugar. It tasted disgusting, but it was food. Still, nobody came. The glass house really was abandoned. Life went on beyond the wire walls, but inside it was just plants and birds. It was dirty, not bad dirt, just the dirt of city air. At night, I had a little light from the street lamps and the houses, but nothing to do. It was warm and quiet. Mostly, I slept. When the oats were gone, I began to look at the plants. Could those round orange fruits on the trees be oranges? Maybe. I picked one and peeled it, then tried a piece. It tasted sweet and a bit sour, just like the ones Auntie May sometimes bought, but I couldn't live on oranges. The bananas were still green. I was tempted to try and eat one, but was afraid of getting pains in my belly. The green pears were still hard as rocks. I had no knife to cut them open. I looked at the bags. The brown stuff was called compost. It was for planting seeds in. The black stuff was for a barbecue. It was the metal bucket with a grill. It would cook food, or it would if I could find matches. There were none. I had to get out. I wasn't strong enough to climb the wire again. I had to make a hole. The wire wall was only around 3 sides. On the fourth was a tall brick wall with no windows. The back of some housing. I found a weak spot down by the ground where the brick wall was, hidden by a bush. From the smell, a fox had found it before me. I made it bigger, but not by much. I got down on my belly and wiggled through. My clothes and hands got even dirtier. I didn't care. I was a beast, like Auntie May said. Outside, I was scared again. It was still winter and cold. I'd spent long enough in hiding to feel odd at being in the open. I kept looking over my shoulder again. I still couldn't believe the band gang went there. I got lost twice, then found the street of shops. I waited until they were shut, and then I climbed over a back wall, found their bins and went through them. All kinds of food gets thrown out every day. If you aren't too worried by it being cold and a little bit old, it's fine. I was glad to have half a pizza and some chicken nuggets. Once or twice I saw a fox going through a bin like I was. Maybe it was the same one that had lived behind the wire wall. It wasn't afraid of me, and I wasn't afraid of it. We were both scavengers. I took care to be seen by as few people as possible, even if, as days and weeks went by, I was less scared of being found by the band gang. It turned out that Auntie May's name for me was like a curse. I had become a beast. Oh, 1 second, I turned it too many pages. Chapter 6. Bear with me. I need a drink. Where did I put my drink? The thing I keep checking is my Alexa. It's got the time on it. I can only read until at the latest 7:30. So let's see how far I get before 7:30. Chapter 6. I had never been good looking, but I knew I was ugly now. I had healed where the cuts were, but my skin was sore and crusty. It had once been smooth like toffee. I could feel my flesh melting. I had some disease. Maybe it was the itchy, scratchy one I'd had before as a kid, when my skin flaked off and Mum stopped giving me milk. Eczema, it was called. Maybe it was a new one. My hair hung down in long dreads. My teeth were scrummy. My breath stank. All of me stank. My nails grew long like black claws. I never washed. Why should I? Nobody cared about me. My mum and Auntie May both were dead. My teachers, they never knew my name. All I had ever had was hard hands giving me hard knocks. You live that way, your heart becomes stone. I kept expecting someone to come in and kick me out of the glass house. Surely this had to belong to somebody. I found some red pills in a drawer. And Mr. Engels hadn't paid council tax, but the bills were from months ago. Maybe he'd done a runner from the glass house, like I'd done a runner from mine. Thanks, I said out loud, just in case Mr. Engels was, dead. I'll look after it. How did the glass house stay warm? The glass helped, but there was even electricity. I flicked a switch just to check, and almost jumped out my skin. Someone was talking out of a dusty old radio. I turned it off, sweating, but nobody came by to check. It was as if I had become invisible. I could have sold the radio, but I didn't know who to sell it to, so I began to listen to it. At first, I nearly went crazy. No music, just voices. Boring. It was stuck on 92 FM. I had to listen to the news and programs about all kinds of things. Politics, health, books, food, plants, money, women's feelings, law, history, more politics. I couldn't understand most of it to start with, but I began to learn stuff. Most was how little I knew. Those voices, I thought of the voice I'd heard when I was running for my life. That kind was wise voice I had trusted. Where are you, man? I whispered sometimes, just to hear myself speak. If I didn't use my voice, I was afraid I might never find it again. Who are you? Are you there? Are you here? There was never any answer. I thought I was pretty sure it was a he, had been a fever dream. Auntie May would have said it was my guardian angel. Everybody has one. You too, Billy. You do a bad thing, they see, and you do a good thing, they see that too. But your guardian angel is there for you. I was lonely. Even if I had no family, I'd always lived with other people. At Auntie May's, she slept four to a bed, sideways, me and the other kids, all our feet sticking out. People shouted, screamed, fought, but they were there, banged up with you. When those kids left, I stayed, because even an old witch with a cane was better than being alone with nowhere to go. Here I was on my own. I was surrounded by people, but outside their world. The wire fence had so many things growing up it, trees and creepers and things, that nobody looked through to the other side. I didn't want them to look. I kept myself busy. I found that the black barbecue stuff was fuel for a thing called a fire pit. This was a metal ball on legs, and if I could find matches, I could cook on it. Mostly I ate oats with water. The glass house garden was giving me food. It was almost dropping into my hands each day. Now spring was coming. I knew nothing about trees and plants, but I knew through the garden center's book about them. It took me a long time to read. How to make seeds and cuttings grow in plants. How to give plants water, food, sun, but not too much. How to train them so they grow the right way. How to give them love, just like they were people. It was the last part that made me think. I never thought that love was like food, or that it mattered to plants. I'd never had anyone or anything to love once Mum died. But I loved those plants. It sounds crazy, I know. At first they were all the same, just green stuff that got in the way. Pretty soon, though, I saw the leaves were even more different than I first thought. Before long, I knew what they were called. There were plants outside the glass house, too. Some was ordinary stuff like grass. Others were taller. These ones looked like sticks with claws on. I saw other kinds of thorns mixed in with them, like they were strangling the claw sticks. I knew what these were. Brambles. In all my estate, they had been the only things that grew. There was a pair of gloves in the glass house. Stiff, grey, dirty, but thick. I put them on to protect my hands and pulled the brambles out. The earth was soft and black, and soon a bird fell down. It hopped and pecked at the ground. It was like a little brown bird with a fat body and tiny thin legs. I'd never been so near one, but near one. It put its head on one side and let out this sound as if asking me a question. When I didn't answer, it hopped closer again and pulled at a worm with its beak like it was eating spaghetti. Then it made this cheeping, whistling sound like it was laughing. It was a cool bird. "Hi," I said. "What's with you?" It made the cheeping sound. "Are you asking me to pull up more?" It looked at me with bright black eyes. It was a friendly look, as if it wanted to play. All that day, the bird stayed beside me. It had no fear, although I could have crushed it with my hand. Every now and then, I would pull out a bit of dried grass and fly off. I saw it was disappearing at the same place. I wondered if it was eating the grass, and then I realized it was building a nest. I wanted so much to see that nest, but something warned me that if I came near, the bird would fly away, so I respected it. It seemed to like hanging out with me. That was the first good thing. I thought of feeding it some of the seeds in the packets, but it wasn't interested in those, so instead I tried putting some into the little pots with compost, just to see what would happen. Nothing happened for a week, but then the second good thing happened. Every pot suddenly had tiny plants in it. Each began with two simple leaves, but then something different grew out of them. Before long, I had dozens of new plants. I didn't know what they were, only that they must be some of the flowers I'd planted. In the heat of the glass house, they grew fat, much faster than the packet one said. I reckoned they should sleep 4 to a bed, as I had. Before long, each plant had a pot of its own. Next was that the sticks by the wire wall weren't dead. As it got warmer, they began to have bumps on them. The bumps grew and split open into leaves and more buds. I looked at the pictures in my plant book and found the sticks were roses. All over the wire wall, roses were folded up tight in green shells. It rained and shone and rained, and then the shells split open, the flowers unfolded. Nothing in my life had been as good as that moment. I'd seen a rose once in a cartoon called Beauty and the Beast. Maybe that's why I loved them, but I'd never seen one in real life. Deep red flowers, like nests of silk and crowns in the middle. They smelled of honey. They smelled of happiness. They smelled of love. They didn't care that I was ugly and my skin was covered in scaly lumps. I knew each one I dug in something called bone meal, which my book said was food for them. I gave them water on dry days. I picked green fly off them with my fingers. I watched the bees kneeling on them, like people praying. They were mine and a miracle. If anybody ever picked one of my roses, I'd rip them to bits. Chapter 7. Even with the fruit the glass house gave me, I needed more to eat. That feeling of my belly eating itself was pain. I was a beast, and a beast needs meat. So I did what everyone did on my estate. I found a kid on the way to school. He was on his own. One look told me all I needed. Small, weak, white shirt, black rucksack. He even wore glasses. Money. Mobile, I said, stepping up and pinning him against the wall. I didn't have a knife, but I didn't need one. All I needed was to be bigger and stronger than he was. With my scarf around my face. What? Hurry up. I breathed into his face and he said, I only have £2. He handed it over. Don't piss me off. Give me the rest. He gave me his mobile. It was one of those old grey Nokias. It wasn't even from emails. Just calls and texts. Nobody could feel shame to have it. You this basic. It's all I have. I couldn't believe a kid in a neighbourhood like this could have so little. You not got another mobile? No, my mum says. What? She says even a mugger wouldn't be. Wrong, I said. So I kept it fully charged in case it might be useful. I turned it off though, just in case. 2 more little kids acting like they've never been robbed before. Easy money. Soon I had 12 quid. I didn't wait to hang around. One of them might tell their mum or teacher, even if I was still more scared of the gang than the police. I didn't want more troubles. Most everybody I knew had done time. Nothing happens to you in prison, but 3 meals a day. That's what they say. Only prisons are full of gangs, so I didn't want to go there. I wanted to spend my 12 quid on getting high, to stop the bad feelings I still had when I remembered Auntie May, with blood all over her. Only I didn't know who sold weed here. There was always someone, even in a place like this, but word might be out to look for me, and even if I saw another guy in a hoodie, I turned and walked away. There was the Poundland on the high street. I got 12 things, a pot with a lid, a mug, wooden spoons, a grater, a tin opener, more tins, eggs, matches, more porridge oats. The one thing that I couldn't get was a knife. I didn't look 18 and had no ID. In the end, I bought scissors, took them apart, sharpened the blade, and used that. I needed them to chop onions. I'd found these growing outside the glass house in a kind of box of earth. It had taken a while to understand it was the root that mattered, not the plant, but the little bird had kind of given me a hint. Onion and eggs made a big difference to the hunger. Of course, I was lonely. All around me, people were doing their thing. It was weird. I'd listen out for them, and that was how my life changed again. Chapter 8. I knew that taking the kids' money was a risk. These weren't like the ones on my estate. They had people looking out for them. They were legal. Already I'd seen a police car going around my new home, very slowly, as if looking for me. That scared me, so I hid for 3 days. And when I was hiding, I was also watching my roses. I knew every one of them. And because of my roses, I saw the girl, Padma. Each day she would walk to school with a friend. They'd come down the alley from the high street and into the square. I could always hear them coming. They'd be laughing and chatting. I knew Padma was beautiful, just from her voice. Really, Angie? How could you? She was teasing. Are you honestly not interested? No. All I want is to finish my studies and go to uni. They know that. But if your family is planning to take you home, Padma, India is not my home, it's theirs. I didn't know what they were talking about. I listened to their voice. It was like the voice of deeper water over stones. I peered through the wire wall, past the bright new leaves of the wood, and saw them go by. 2 girls, their long hair tied back. Padma's was in a single shining plait. It fell to her waist. I wondered what it would look like untied. I'd never seen anything like her. I had done it with girls because if you didn't on my estate, you're gay. If you're gay, you're dead. It meant nothing. The girls were there to have babies like we go to prison. It just happens. Even though they love the babies, they know if it's a boy, he'll be like his baby father. If a girl, she'll be like them. On and on, the same pattern. I never thought about whether girls liked me or I liked them. I only hoped they wouldn't laugh at me. Anyway, Padma and Angie were not like that. These girls were like people from the radio. They were people. I listened and waited. I wanted to see Padma's face. Chapter 9. As it got warmer, I got bolder. I'd work out of doors with my shirt off on a warm day, though I always hid behind the trees. My scars still itched and pulled, especially the one on my back, and I didn't want to scare the girls. They always walked to school together at the same time, chatting. I'd never heard so much chat. It made me smile, as if I was listening to birds. I learned that Angie, her friend, was the daughter of the chemist in the high street. Padma was the daughter of the newsagent. Both their parents had come from India. Angie was working to become a lawyer, and Padma to become a doctor. They did different subjects at school: sciences, maths, history. Sometimes they would imitate. It's just such a word. You know it, but then when you have it written, it's weird. Imitate their fathers and mothers, saying, "Good job," before giggling. When they giggled like this, I knew they were trying to keep stuff inside them that most people didn't know about. Maybe they didn't want to be doctors and lawyers, or maybe they did. I knew that doctors and lawyers did, more or less, sometimes, if you were lucky or unlucky on my estate. You got to see one of them before you got sent to prison or hospital. I wondered what you needed to do to become one. I couldn't imagine it. It must take a lot of school, even more than sixth form. School had been one of my favourite things. I liked learning things. I read slowly. But if I got told something, I never forgot. I liked being in another place. No dogs barking, or music blaring, or people shouting. I wanted to get to college. I wanted a better life. So I kept trying, until I kept getting mugged. I had gone crying back to Aunt May's, and she'd put stuff on my cuts. Then I went back until the band gang began picking on me more and more. They hated that I was wearing a white shirt and not doing drugs. It was like everybody had to be like them, even if nobody could. Of course, I was picking on kids here. I didn't like thinking about that. I had myself to look after, didn't I? Besides, I didn't hit them or do any of the bad things that had been done to me, like making them strip or taking their shoes or showing them my knife. I didn't need to. It was enough just to be the beast, big and stinky and scary. They handed over their lunch money. I needed it more than they did. They had homes and clothes and food and stuff. I had nothing. Everything cost £1 at Poundland, but if I didn't get those pounds, I couldn't eat. Even Auntie May's hadn't fed me much. I'd never thought about all the gear she needed just to begin feeding me. She must have collected that as carefully as the little brown bird had collected the grass. I needed that gear now. The pot, the spoons, the cooking oil, salt, rice, beans and spices, and meat. I was desperate for meat because I was growing. I had never thanked her, never understood what a struggle it was. I just gulped it down like the beast that I was becoming and blamed her for my bad skin. There was no meat here, not unless I trapped squirrels and cats, and how could I without a knife? I kept buying the tuna and sardines and tomato sauce. Mostly what I ate was porridge, 12 packs or a pound, enough for a week. But as the days grew brighter and warmer, I found I needed to buy food less. The glass house fed me its pears. The pears now had black, bumpy skin like dinosaurs. I tried biting into them when they softened, but that didn't work. Then I tried peeling them. Inside was a soft green flesh and a huge pip. The flesh tasted like nuts with a little salt. It was good and filling like the bananas. However, much I picked, there was always seemed to be more. Everything grew so fast there. In the heat and light, it was like magic. Bit by bit, I was making the glass house into a home. I got a mattress, rolling it up and sliding it through the hole in the wall. Maybe a dog had pissed on it before I found it, but it felt like luxury. People put things out on the street that they didn't want. Shoes, newspapers, old pots, old china, old clothes, dust sheets. I took what I could. I went out most nights like the foxes. Sometimes I saw other human foxes around. They'd be breaking into cars to look for loose change. The next day there would be cries of sadness and anger, and the sound of glass being swept up. Tinkle crunch. £200 of damage for £2. I heard one of the people who lived in the square say. He was a teacher at the school where Padma went. His girlfriend was going to have a kid. I could see. Of all the people living on the square, they were my favourite. I could see through the window of their basement flat because my foxhole was right opposite, and they often didn't draw the curtains in the evening. They were so gentle to each other. I didn't know people could be like that. He was called Ian and she was called Katie. Sometimes when I was coming back from Poundland, I'd pass Katie. She always smiled and said hi, but I never knew what to say back. I was worried about the cars. I had a feeling that people might know I was living in the glass house and think it was me. I was even more worried because I sometimes thought the guys looked like they might be in the gang, but how could anyone from there be here? When I went in or out past the wall, I was even more careful not to be seen. Padma and Angie made me think of the first time how I must look. Now that it wasn't freezing outside, I didn't have to wear everything at once. So I peeled off my clothes. It was so weird being without them. Like taking the skin off one of the black pears. I felt shivery. All that I had was in rags. You live in the same clothes day in, day out. They'll fall to bits. Mine were beyond stinky and also full of holes. I needed new socks, new t-shirt, new hoodie, new jeans. Most of all, I needed new trainers. My feet were the only things I could depend on, even if I ever had to run again. But I didn't have what even the cheapest trainers cost. Padma and Angie, they were so clean, they seemed to shine. I knew that if they ever met me, they'd probably wrinkle up their perfect noses. Not because they were mean, but because it was so long since my clothes and I had been washed. The little brown bird came down to see if I had anything for him and his mate. I didn't even have some boiled rice. Right, I said, I'd best get sorted then. Back to Poundland. Each t-shirt, each pair of socks was another kid without lunch money. The cashiers had stopped giving me looks like I was going to steal from the shop. I spent £1 on a toothbrush, another £1 on toothpaste, my hair, but Poundland didn't have shampoo for dreadlocks. I bought rice instead. I listened to the girls walking to and from school. On the way, they were in more of a hurry, but on the way back, they seemed to slow down. The reason was that they liked my roses. Smell that? Oh wow, look at the blossom. It's a real little wood in there. It's such a weird place, Padma, you know. Nobody knows who owns it. I picked up my ears at that. People have tried for ages to discover why it's been abandoned. It wasn't always, was it? I'm sure I remember some old guy in there. Not for ages. People don't know if he was squatting or trying to run a business. It looks a mess, doesn't it? Can't it be knocked down? Turned into a pot, maybe? My dad says not, said Padma. The greenhouse is listed or something. It used to be a garden centre. More like a garden jungle. Their voices were full of laughter. It doesn't look so bad now all the roses are out. No, I've never seen them so big. And look at the morning glories, such deep blue. It makes me think of Tamil Nadu, Padma said in a dreamy voice. Whole mountains covered with flowers. Do you go home every Christmas? You know we can't afford that, do you? No, every 3 years, but each time we go, one of my sisters comes back married. They were silent. And you? I dread that. To be married to some stinky old man with no education, just so he can get a passport and my parents some money. I want to go to uni. My Amma says I could continue schooling after I get married, only I may get a husband who does not wish me to do that. To be trapped, Padma said, and I could hear the shiver in her voice. We all know it's illegal, but has anyone been prosecuted for it? Ever? I didn't understand what this was about. Where I came from, nobody got forced to marry. Almost nobody got married. But these were different people, with different religion. Maybe that was it. I couldn't understand, though. Why, if you had a daughter as smart as Padma and Angie, you wouldn't want them to be free? Why you wouldn't trust them? They weren't like the girls I'd known on my estate. Girls so angry and broken that they could never be free. I hadn't been free either until I came to the glass house. Padma and Angie didn't talk much about this. I had the feeling that it made them unhappy, and that made Padma unhappy, made me unhappy too. My friend, the bird, was the lucky one. He'd made his nest now, and every so often his mate would come out and sing, like she was teasing. Then he'd sing back, and fill his beak with my cooked rice, hop over and feed her. It was a game, but not a game. When she'd had enough, she'd fly off to her hidden nest. My glass house felt more and more like my own hidden nest. I had food, more and more of it as the garden grew, only I had no mate to feed. And that's where I'm going to end it right now, because I've got to go have my supper. But just checking how many chapters there is. Give me a second. 21. So there's 11 left. So when I get back, I'm going to finish it off, because I'm really intrigued now. So for part 1 of The Other Side of You, that's me done. I'll be back after my supper to finish it off. So thank you for watching. And comment below if you're enjoying this or anything, because the next books I'm reading, if I can, because like I say, Murder at the Theatre Royal was so old-fashioned I couldn't read it, will be Knights of the Wobbly Table, The Midnight Library, This Is Going to Hurt, Wrong Time, Wrong Place, The Dinner, which will probably be a couple of takes because it looks long, bigger than some of these, and A Fresh Start, which has got 10 stories in this book, so I would probably do all of them actually, and that's what it looks like. So yeah, some of these are mine, some of these are library books. These are the library books, and so is the one I'm reading right now. I can take these back to Blythe hopefully, because I don't see myself going back to Amble anytime soon. I mean, not Amble, Ashington, anytime soon. But yeah, ta-ta for now, and I'll be back after my food. Bye bye.